Thanks for coming to this session. So my name is André, Angelantoni, and I've been bitten by the automated testing bug. I feel like I'm at a 12-step meeting. So who here is already doing automated testing? Okay, great. Okay, and so who here is already using either Cypress or Playwright? Okay, all right, interesting. Okay, so you may hear, I have interesting things for everyone. So my company is called Performant Labs. I've been working with Drupal since 4.6. I've stood up a bunch of Drupal websites that you've probably seen or used or interacted with. And so now what I'm doing is I'm turning my attention to automated testing. My vision is that every Drupal site, the second that it starts, that it launches, it has a suite of at least smoke tests that are able to run and make sure that everything is working. So I'm going to describe to you at the very end the automated testing kit, which is a new Drupal module that can help with that. But we got to get there first. And so the topic that we're going to discuss at first is, should you use Cypress or Playwright? Now, obviously, there are tons of tools out there. But what seems to have happened is the marketplace has focused on Cypress and Playwright for some very good reasons. And let's launch in. So here's what we're going to cover today. Why this presentation? Where are we in the testing landscape? I'll go through a brief history of both Cypress and Playwright. I'll explain some important differences between them. I'll give you my recommendations. I'll give you more resources. That's also when I'll discuss automated testing kit. And we'll have time for some Q&A. If you have a real burning question, go ahead and raise your hand. I like them actually as you go because it's immediate. And if you have that question, it's possible other people do. It's actually likely that other people do. Okay, so why this presentation? It has gotten much easier to perform end-to-end tests. And that's because there's a new generation of tools on the block. A lot of us grew up with Selenium and Behat and Cucumber and all that sort of thing. This is a whole new world. And I think people are getting excited about testing it because it is a step change in ease of use to get your testing projects going. It's remarkable. And so the two of the most recent additions are Cypress, which was released in 2017, and Playwright, which was released in 2020 by Microsoft. These two tools seem to be offering the best balance of flexibility, power, and ease of use. Now, they are scripting tools. So this video this presentation doesn't go into the whole landscape. I have another one that does, that I'm going to give you a link for in just a second. So these tools being scripting tools, you do need to have some developers or some testers that know how to program on stack. Okay, so these aren't those clickety-click tools, although you can do a little bit of that with both of them. So what this presentation is and isn't. First of all, it is objective. I try to be objective, but I do state my favorite. And I actually started using automated testing kit, writing Cypress tests, and then I learned about Playwright as I went because I was hearing so many good things about it. So you're going to hear definitely a winner at the end of this, but know that I came to it honestly. It's not an in-depth technical overview. Okay, for that, see Cypress and Playwright, a comparison, which is a presentation in the resources slide, which you'll have access to. You'll have access to these slides. Okay, so where are we in the testing landscape? This is one of the better diagrams I could find of testing out there, and we're down there in the lower left. So there's a whole lot more to be done. You notice that it doesn't include unit testing. So we're just talking about that section there, where the red is. Now this is a great slide that came from Sean and Mark, because you'll see this testing pyramid often. And yeah, you see end-to-end testing, at the very top, and then you've got API testing and integration component and unit testing. But traditionally, the way the Drupal community has handled it, it's been more like that. And believe it or not, it's actually okay. You can, if you want, do that over time. But if you start with end-to-end testing, you are already so far ahead of most teams out there that really just get started and get more granular over time. It's totally fine if your pyramid is all yellow at the very beginning. The other thing that I want to, without going into a lot of philosophy, what we're seeing in the industry is something called shift left. And that means shifting your testing left. And what does the left mean? Well, it's the left. That instead of the testing happening right at the end as a kind of an afterthought, and oh my God, we're about to launch in 2 weeks, somebody make some tests for us. Move the testing thinking earlier in the process. Really make it something that is part of the standing up of the site. And eventually you'll get to the point that your developers, when they're submitting their code, they're submitting the tests with the code. In my opinion, a professional developer doesn't just say, here's my code and I promise you it works. The professional developer delivers the tests that say, here's my code and here's the evidence that it works. And if a developer doesn't have that attitude, are they a professional? I would assert that they're actually not. At some point, developers really have to start getting that testing is critical to say, these are complex systems. It's insane that you just hope that all your personal manual testing did the job as things get more and more complex. Okay, so what does shift left ultimately result in? Reduced costs, faster feature rollouts, because you can hear that there are some teams that are putting releases out several times a day. That's impossible to do without a robust suite of automated tests. Well, okay, so maybe you're not going to go for releasing several times a day, but maybe you're going to do it every 2 weeks. And maybe you're tired of that last week when you're about to launch the next release of it being a total scramble, and you've got half your team doing manual tests, and you only have a few automated tests, and you're still crossing your fingers that everything is going to be okay. And then ultimately higher quality. So we don't want our customers or our users to find the bugs. We want to find the bugs. Okay, so this is part of a series, as I said, setting up a comprehensive automated testing regime for Drupal using Cypress and Playwright. So that's available there. That's number 2 is should I use Cypress or Playwright right now? Okay, and then I've got another couple in the works. So follow me on LinkedIn if you want to keep track of automated testing specifically for Drupal. So that's my mission, is to get Drupal and automated testing used by everyone. Okay, so let's go back to Cypress. A brief history. It was created in 2015 by Brian Mann to address limitations in existing testing frameworks, particularly Selenium. It is developer friendly. That's why it got so popular. It includes live reloading, visual feedback during testing. These are all awesome things compared to Selenium, and a whole bunch of other tools. It includes automatic waiting for elements to appear, so that eliminates adding the wait commands that we've all had to do. Wait, okay, wait some more, no, that didn't work. And then you end up getting flaky tests. So Cypress was one of the first tools to really tackle how flaky tests were. Playwright has done exactly the same thing, so they're neck and neck in that regard. And ultimately, easier setup with Selenium. I was on projects where eventually we just said, it's got to be an easier way. It keeps breaking. Even just the setup of Selenium was really fragile. And Cypress runs on JavaScript, which is, if not the world's most popular language, maybe that's still PHP, I'm not sure. But it's probably neck and neck between JavaScript and PHP. And today, Cypress has a vibrant community, and there are many people trained in it. So you can find lots of people in the marketplace that will help you write and maintain your Cypress tests. So that's the download history. That's recent. I just took that snapshot last week. So when I say popular, I'm not joking. Almost 6 million downloads. Okay, so let's look at a brief history of Playwright. It was developed and released by Microsoft in January 2020. It was forked from the Puppeteer project, but unlike Puppeteer is still popular, it's still being used, they designed it to work with multiple browsers. And it has all of the benefits of Cypress, plus it's much faster. I'll show you some numbers later. It has very tight integration with Visual Studio Code, which makes the test debug loop really smooth, and it's a joy to use. And I'm going to give you a demo. It has none of the limitations that Cypress has. So you'll learn that Cypress can't easily, can't at all work with multiple tabs. You can't control multiple browsers with Cypress. The native iframe support is a little wonky. If you need to move between websites, Cypress has trouble with that. And I'm going to go through some of the design decisions that cause those issues. And because Playwright didn't make the same design decisions, it doesn't have those constraints. So that's what's happening. Again, that's a recent snapshot. So it's exceeded Cypress. Okay, so why was Cypress embraced? Many people had experienced the frustration of testing tools, such as Selenium, and it basically revolutionized front-end development because it radically improved the developer experience. The test runner is open source as well. But you can see that things are changing. So when I gave this talk maybe a year ago, the blue line wasn't even, it was coming up fast, but no one really I didn't even expect it to do what it's doing right now, okay? And so you can also see that Cypress is starting to plateau a bit. And you're hearing more and more teams are actually taking the time to move their tests from Cypress to Playwright. And I'll explain why. So let's go through some important differences. So first of all, don't get me wrong, Cypress is a good tool, and it's really done a nice package together. And if you pay them, this starts at $67 a month. If you pay them the $67 a month, they give you a nice dashboard and some reporting and orchestration and that sort of thing. So in terms of getting ready and started quickly, can't be beat. Cypress is great. They're doing a good job in that. And that's their Cypress Cloud project. Now, they're handling the Cypress Cloud reporting and test orchestration, which is not the same thing as providing the servers upon which your tests are going to run. So you still have to set that up. Or you can use Sauce Labs or Lambda Test or Browser Test. Any one of those companies, they all know how to use Cypress. So it's a really good product, and it just works. There was an open source competitor called Sorry Cypress that allowed people to self-host, but this was undercutting Cypress's ability to monetize and therefore pay for further development of Cypress. So sounds familiar? WordPress, that whole issue? Well, Cypress cut off that tool from getting access to certain other tools that the Cypress company provided. So now what's happening is you may find yourself, if you're using Sorry Cypress, blocked from running, and the Sorry Cypress team recommends that people move to Playwright. So, which is a shame, because I want the underdog to win, which is Cypress in this case, and they do need money to keep on moving the development forward. It's not their fault; they had to do something, and but I think it's going to cause them long-term trouble. Okay, so here's another issue with Cypress. It introduces Cypress-isms. So in Drupal, we called them Drupalisms, and we're year by year or release by release trying to get rid of our Drupalisms, the weirdness that only Drupal has. Well, Cypress has its own, and I call it stupid knowledge. And it's not my term. I got that from some other presenter. So a lot of software has a lot of stupid knowledge, where you have to know it, otherwise something isn't going to work. But you shouldn't have to know it. That's this category of knowledge in Cypress. It has a fair amount of things like that. And so the Cypressisms slow down learning when you have new developers and using the framework. So 2 examples are using variables and the try-catch construct. And we're going to look at both of those. Why are they a problem? Because one of the key decisions that Cypress made is that it queues commands for later execution. They don't run in the moment. Your commands are queued up, and then the runner starts from the top at the queue and runs through them. So here's what that means in real life. Working with variables becomes challenging because Cypress queues commands for later execution, variables aren't available when you expect them to be. So you have to store the variable in a Cypress construct and then retrieve it later. And although this allows for automatic waiting, in other words, this queuing system is how they handled automatic waiting, now simple variable assignment no longer works. So what does that look like? Here's an example. So you have to save the variable there. And then you retrieve the variable here. If I just tried to assign the variable myself and then tried to use it right away, it just wouldn't work. It would fail. Okay. Not the end of the world. Let's see what the next one is. Try, don't catch. Another typical construct that doesn't work is the try-catch structure. So I actually asked Gemini, why doesn't it work? And its response was that Cypress wants to do deterministic testing and reproducible failures and focus on the application state and blah, blah, blah. Only at the end does it admit that it doesn't actually work because of the way that Cypress queues commands. Now, is this wrong, the deterministic testing, the reproducible failures? Technically, no, it's not wrong. But the reality is the reason why the try-catch doesn't work is because of this queuing. So we're going to look at the second key design decision, which is Cypress chains commands. On the plus side, the chaining is actually quite elegant. Really. Okay, so here are some examples. That second line with the should is a continuation of the first one. You could put it all in the same line if you wanted. And so you just use dots. A lot of languages use that. The second one is a little bit more involved. I want to get the cart button, and then I want to click on it, and then there's going to be a result from that, and I can, with that result, I can execute an assertion, which is this case, does it contain added to cart. But then what that does is it can lead to what's affectionately called the Cypress pyramid of doom. So you've got a very simple piece of HTML there. And here's how you have to test that. You've tested the first thing, and now you've got it succeeded, it found it, so it can continue. Then you tested the second thing, it succeeded, it can continue. And then finally you can test the third thing. Well, sometimes you can get, actually, this pyramid of doom can get to be quite impressive. It's all because of this chaining construct. So you get things like this. This was 2 years ago. This is one of the reasons my team is exploring either Playwright or going back to Selenium. Oof. Both of these tools are quite a bit less fussy to work with, and they don't get in the way of writing tests. And that was my experience too. When I was learning Cypress to make the initial set of tests for Automated Testing Suite, I was trying regular things, and I was reading the documentation, but probably not enough. And it wasn't working. And I had to go figure out why wasn't it working. And bit by bit, I kept on learning about these Cypressisms. So here's another difference. Performance. Playwright runs much faster on single threads and includes parallelization out of the box. I'll give you some data in just a sec. Here we go. So take a look at the difference. So Cypress is not slow, But compared to Playwright, it is pokey. And part of it is because Playwright has a different architecture. Cypress, the test runner, is actually running inside of the browser. And all of its logic is inside of the browser. Whereas Playwright is outside of the browser and it's just messaging the browser. Well, browsers are not known to be speed demons for running JavaScript. If you want to run JavaScript in a very high performance way, what you do is you run it outside in an environment that just runs JavaScript. And that's why you see, in part, such a big difference. So this comes from how we reduced testing time by 70%, which is a very good and valuable article. I have it in the resources links at the end that you should read. And I say in the first point, it includes parallelization out of the box. In order for you to get parallelization with Cypress, now that you can no longer use Sorry Cypress, you need to sign up for their cloud service. Okay, so I just mentioned how Cypress runs in the browser, and there is an advantage to that. Because the code is in the browser, you have full access to your apps. So with Selenium and even Playwright, in order to talk to the browser, it's whatever the browser API gives you. Whereas since your code, your testing code with Cypress is running in the browser, you literally have every API that the browser gives you at your fingertips. That means that there's no need for object serialization, because that's what you have to do when you talk between an external service and your browser. And it's impossible for Cypress to miss elements because it's running in the browser. But there are some disadvantages. Because it's evaluated in the browser, it's harder to communicate with the back end. Makes sense? You're unable to connect or import server-side libraries or modules directly. And you can't control multiple browsers. And you currently can't control multiple tabs either. There are ways around it. So I don't want to make it seem like this is impossible. And I'm not going to get into the workarounds. But it's yet another Cypressism that you have to learn how to handle. And it's significantly slower than Playwright, as I said, because browsers don't run JavaScript nearly as well as external engines. Okay, but there are some great Cypress resources. Because it started years ago, there's a fabulous community. And Gleb Bamutov, he's done over 500 videos, hundreds of tutorials. So if you come across an issue, check with him first. He solved it. And he has courses as well. Okay, so going to Playwright. Playwright has tight Visual Studio Code integration. As I mentioned, the test debug loop in Playwright is fast and it's a joy to use. And I'm about to give you a demo right now. So let's do that. Okay, so make sure I'm running my container service. I happen to be using OrbStack. You can use Docker, either one. OrbStack plays a little nicer with Lando and DDEV, I found. Docker gives you problems if you have problems, try OrbStack. And I think I'm already running my containers. I am. So let's go check that out. All right, so I have just a plain Drupal 10.3 site. So I'm going to go to I'm going to the Drupal site right now. On this plain Jane site with a few modules installed, one of the modules that's already installed is Automated Testing Kit. And this isn't a demo of Automated Testing Kit, but you're going to get to see little bits of it anyway. So Automated Testing Kit is down here inside of Modules Contrib. And what you do is you run a setup script here, and it copies either the Playwright scripts or the Cypress scripts into the root of your project, which is up here. So that's why we have the Automated Testing Kit tests right there waiting for us. And so you can see we have contact us, entity, menu, pager, registration, and so on. So the idea is that if you start with automated testing kit, you've got about 20 tests already. Customize those because sometimes people make changes. But the goal is if you need a set of 20 smoke tests, smoke tests being the core set of tests that you want to run within 15 minutes so that you get quick responses. It's meant to test everything at a very high level, but try to hit everything at least once. So it's wide rather than deep. That's what smoke tests are all about. So I already have the extension installed for Visual Studio Code, and I believe it's called Playwright Test. So we go here, that's it there. So it's already installed. And then that gives you this little beaker here for your testing. So we click on that, and now it gives you an explorer of just your tests. It scanned your project, and it found in the root directory, in the common locations, where your tests are located. You see that I've been running already some tests. Green means that they're successful. And each test has beside it the play button, the debug button, and then go to test. Okay, well let's just go take a look at this media test. We're going to go click on that, and it pulled up the spec. So let's take a look from the top so you get a little bit of orientation. You've got your file block up here. Automated testing kit gives you a couple dozen helper functions to help with your testing. Then you have to set up Playwright. Playwright has its own configuration. Okay, and then Automated Testing Kit has its own configuration. I'm not going to go through that right now. And then the tests begin. So here's one of them. All the tests in Automated Testing Kit have a ID. So you see ATK and then PW for Playwright or CY for Cypress. And then the numbers are the same between both sets of tests. And then you get your properties or your attributes. So this is a media test. That's the category it belongs to. It's considered a smoke test. You can change all this, by the way. You can take this out just by removing, if you don't want that to run as one of your smoke tests, just remove that tag. And it does alter the DB. So it's going to do write changes to the DB. And so sometimes you might not want to run your write changes on, say, production. So it's all about tags now. Yes, you can put things in folders, for sure, but really, tags are a way easier way to specify everything. All right, so if I run the test, yeah, go ahead.
The tags, are those standardized, or are those something you've come up with?
They're the automated testing kit tags, but they're pretty close to, like, we all come to the same conclusions, like smoke and skip and yeah. Okay. But by the way, all that is here. So if you go to the automated testing kit, okay, and I'll put this presentation here as well so you have access to it. But then you go to the documentation here. Lots and lots of documentation, and it explains how to install, configure, and then what you're asking is probably here, which is what are the categories.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So this is going to grow over time because we only have 20 Drupal tests, and there's likely going to be 50 soon. And then here are the test descriptions down below. Okay, so back to this demo. How am I doing for time? Okay, pretty good. So if I click on this play button, it'll just run right away. It messages the browser, and it's done like that. Super quick. Or, I do have already a breakpoint set up. I can say I want to debug. So let's do that. And you saw that it messaged the browser, so that's running right here. So let's put that over here. and put that over here. And then I'll use these buttons up here so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to do a step over. It's not easy to see, is that? Okay. So that's one of the helper functions that's given to you. Login via form. So I'm going to step over that one. Step over also means execute. So now you're logged in. Keep on going. And look at what I get to do. I get to hover over constants and variables. I've got them over here. It's a full-blown developer's environment. Lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. And then I'll say continue, and off it goes. Okay, and if I go back to here, I see a green. So that was successful. That loop that I just showed you is so rare out there. Cypress doesn't have it. It's not terrible in Cypress, but it's not compared to this. This is super fast and it's a joy to use. So you get instant feedback. The developers love using this. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. There. Let's keep on going. Okay, so let's do a little summary of Cypress. It is a mature framework with a code example for every situation. So if you're using Cypress now, I mean, you're probably doing great work and you're being productive. And the chaining, like I said, allows code to be elegant. However, some of the core design decisions, like running in the browser and queued commands, are a strength in certain situations, but they hinder its development in others. And it will never be as fast as Playwright. Several of the Cypress-isms there are several Cypress-isms that slow learning and development, and you must purchase a cloud account for parallelization. Some issues take a long time for the team to handle. They are smaller than Microsoft. I think their team has fewer developers. And they even closed one of my issues without checking with me that it was still a problem. It was still a problem. And I'm like, God, guys, you closed my issue. And you didn't. I waited over a year for them, and I bugged them multiple times. So they're just a little company that's making choices that are consistent with a smaller company. And yeah, it's bugging people. Like a lot of people had their issues closed without being checked. No one checked in on them. So, and that's not true with Playwright. I got a response from the Playwright team on one of my issues. I think the longest was about 3 days. Okay, it's not the same day, but you're not paying for support. So 3 days I thought was pretty good. So Playwright is younger, but Microsoft has essentially caught up. To everything that Cypress was able to do, blaze the trail, Playwright has caught up. It has extraordinary performance. The parallelization is built in, has a great trace feature I didn't show it to you. More typical programming constructs, so any developer is going to understand Playwright right away. And as I said, the issues are addressed by the development team faster than Cypress. And the community is growing extremely quickly. As you saw, it's actually surpassing in terms of downloads Cypress. So a lot of teams are actually taking the time to rewrite their tests. But so what are some of the drawbacks of Playwright? Do you have to set up everything in Playwright? Yes, it's not as plug and play as Cypress. Not yet. But I think what's going to happen is the third-party vendors are all going to do basically what you can do with Cypress. So you'll still have to pipe your test results to a test case management tool, either one of them. And if you want advanced parallelization, it does take a little bit of thinking on how to do that with Playwright. We do that for our clients, or just hit me up on the Automated Testing Kit Slack channel, and I can give you some tips on that. And you're still going to probably want to send your results to something like Allure Reports. If you want to know over time, what's my test coverage, what's the percentage of tests that pass versus fail, well, you're going to need some sort of tool to collect it. We are partial to Allure Reports. It's an open source tool, but there are others out there. Okay, so my recommendation. If you're starting a new project and there are no Cypress or Playwright tests skills already on the team, you should probably start with Playwright. If you're writing tests for an existing Cypress project and already have Cypress skills on the team, well, everyone knows how tight testing skills are. I'm not saying there's no need for you to rush out and transfer all the way to Playwright. You can keep on using Cypress. And before you switch from Cypress to Playwright, just keep your eyes open, perform some proof of concepts, make sure that all your most complicated tests, you know how to do them in Playwright. I think you will find a way to do them all, but I just am warning you, before you switch tools, do your due diligence. Okay, so some more resources that I've been mentioning along the way. Cypress and Playwright, a comparison, definitely worth watching. Goes into lots of technical details. The debate between Cypress and Playwright, between Gleb and Baumgartner. At the time, he was really saying, hey, listen, all the things that people are knocking Cypress about, they're not that bad. So he makes the counter-argument to what you're hearing from me today, okay? And he was a former Cypress employee, so he really knows the tool well. If you intend to switch to Playwright, or are considering, you can read this, how we reduced testing time by 70%. And then she also has a YouTube on that, where she gets interviewed, which is also interesting. So her team was called Lingvano. They switched their 200 tests to Playwright. Faster test writing. They saw better cross-browser support. They used standard JavaScript. Because of the chaining specifically and Pyramid of Doom and all that, Cypress seemed to, this is their quote, seems less like JavaScript and more like a unique framework. And it took them only 2 weeks to convert, because they use Copilot, but also Playwright offers a migration tool. So it's actually not that big of a project if you want to switch over. And then if you go on to the documentation for automated testing kit, at that URL at the bottom, I'm only showing you half of the resources that I've collected, but if you really want to go deep, I'd be surprised if I've missed something out there. Go there and watch the first two in the very least, and then as much else as you want. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about automated testing kit. What I'm finding is automated testing kit is gravitating towards, we're just putting more energy into Playwright. So we're about to come out with version 1.3. It's going to have a few more tests for search and for menus, some more helper functions. But I want to tell you what's in the automated testing kit ecosystem. So first of all, you get the Drupal module itself. And that provides currently 20 tests written in Cypress and Playwright. And it's a great start for a smoke test suite. You're going to still probably want to customize them because every site seems to change something, right? Dozens of helper functions, like I said, and it has hooks to help specifying elements. So the vision for automated testing kit is that if you're enabling the module on your site, which might be sitting on a testing server, or it might be sitting on your production server, then you're going to get access to the hooks that we provide. Now, why do you want that? Well, because Drupal doesn't actually always give you great access to the selectors so that you can pick what you want to test. And so one of the things that takes the longest time often for a tester is to figure out how to locate the element. So what we've done in automated testing kit is we've added some hooks that nicely add a data attribute. So if you want to test for the presence of a specific media item, we actually include the media ID in the HTML. Same thing for the nodes, same thing for the taxonomies. So right away, one big problem is solved for you. Just ask for the ID, and it's somewhere on that page. And we're going to keep on adding that kind of stuff to make the tester's life easier. Typically what you would have to do is you'd have to the poor developer would the poor test developer would talk to the other developers and say, listen, I am having a heck of a time finding a selector. Can you guys make a little tweak to do this change so that I can find that? And yeah, maybe they'll say yes, but often they say no, or it's low priority, or it takes 2 weeks for them to see it. Well, we're going to do all that right from scratch so that when you fire up your tool, the selectors are easy for you to find. So that's the URL, which I already showed you. We've also released the Testor CLI tool, which I'm really proud of. I wish I had this years ago. So it's a way to handle snapshots for both your database and your files. It will grab the snapshot. Currently it works with Pantheon out of the box, grabs a snapshot, and then it pushes it either to an S3 compatible store or a SFTP server. And then you can give it certain names, so the testers have their own snapshot, the developers have their own database snapshot. You can pull the snapshots down from your store, either on your CI system, like on GitHub Actions or wherever you run your tests, or on all the developer machines. Because that's one of the things we all do, right? At the beginning of the sprint, somebody on Monday morning grabs a snapshot from production, massages it a little bit, and then pushes it somewhere so that all the developers have access to it. But the testers need a different snapshot because they have to take that snapshot and then they often have to make changes to it. They have to add certain data, or they have to tweak it in a certain way, or they have to change the permissions in a certain way. So they need their own snapshot. So working with snapshots quickly becomes a pain in the butt, and this tool helps. And we're about to start work on adding a plugin for sanitization. So the idea is Testor grabs the database from your usually production. There's a plugin written in PHP because the tool is written in Robo. So people already know how to use PHP. You make your plugin, it sanitizes everything, and then it sends the snapshot up to wherever you want to store it. Okay, this is what your testing could eventually be. I'll give you a little bit of a tour. So not everyone here has 12 developers and 3 testers and blah, 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 blah. Okay, but this is what it could be. So you have the developer machines over here, and they can run their tests on their local website, which is on their own machine. Or they can run it against a testing server or production or whatever, okay? But you may need a Jenkins server so that you can fire up your tests. Okay, well that's another thing you have to stand up. You might want a report server so that you can collect all of the results from your tests. If you are running containers inside of your team, then you may want a registry server so that the developers can grab the latest DDev or Lando or whatever it is, and they're just running all out of the box. And then if you want to do things like with Testor, you may want an S3 compatible server or an SFTP server. Okay, so that's like one part. Then you might have third-party tools where you're going to need an orchestration server. That might be Lambda Test or Sauce Labs or Testery. You may want a test case management tool like TestRails or Testany. I particularly like Testany. They give you 3 accounts for free. And then it's super slick, modern tool. It's one of the earliest entrants on the market, but they're still about 5 years old. Definitely recommend Testany. And then you have maybe a GitHub Action server. That's where when someone submits a PR, a pull request, you want all the tests to run, or maybe a subset of the tests to run. So you have to talk to GitHub Action server. And you might also have tugboat previews. These are the ephemeral, they can be long-lasting, but they're typically very short-lasting instances of your site just to run a test from a particular branch. So you test things on the branch before you merge them. Amazing. So you can have hundreds of branches in action by your team at one go, and every one of them has their own test server. It's amazing. And by the way, you can do that with Drupal Forge now too. I was just talking to Sal, and he's just rolling that out. So that's the ultimate. But you don't have to go there. And it's going to take you months, trust me, because I've set these up. It's going to take you months to get there. Just start with running tests on your development machine, testing your local site. Even that is going to get your foot in the water, or your toe in the water. And then you add a test server. And then you can point to the production server. And by the way, be careful with the production server. So make sure that if you don't want the database to change, you take away that tag that says alters DB. Or get your developers to hide the data that you're creating. Because you can do that, right? You can tell Drupal, maybe there's a view that you need to test. You can alter the view so that it makes sure that your test data doesn't get shown to the end user, and you can still test against your production server. Okay, so the answer of it's dangerous to test against production is not do not test production. That's insane. The answer is be careful, do your homework, but you got to test production because that's what the actual customers are using. They're not using your staging server, they're not using your testing server, and they're certainly not using your developers' machines. Okay, so you can test production, but you got to be careful. All right, so what's coming up with automated testing kits? More tests, of course. The sanitization plugin, I already told you that. The suite of smoke tests for Drupal CMS, I committed that I'm going to convert all the tests to Drupal CMS. Probably not going to do that for Cypress. Now that I'm 6 months on, I'm going to just do it for Playwright. So the idea is that when Drupal CMS is released, it has also a set of smoke tests ready for it. And then I was just talking to Sal, and we're going to make it so that you can run automated testing kit in DrupalForge.org right off the bat. So DrupalForge.org, if you don't know about it, it's pretty cool. You can create your own IDE, and you can test all these installations lickety-split. And like I said, he's also creating ephemeral previews, which is awesome. Okay, so you can find me at any of those. You can set up an appointment at Performing Labs at Calendly. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Automated Testing Kit on Drupal Slack. How did I do for time? Okay, we have some time for questions. All right, any questions? Yes?
So can you integrate other JavaScript testing libraries like Axe, for example, which does accessibility testing?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so is that like on the scale of development skills needed to do that? Where are we?
That is actually not hard. You just do an import, and then you set up some configuration. If you want, just hit me up on Automated Testing Kit, because we're doing that for Stanford right now. Good question.
So I was doing some research into this, trying to figure out what's the best thing, and first place I looked was Drupal core, and Drupal core is using Nightwatch, which it seems like nobody is using anymore.
Right.
Because, hopefully if you're using what Drupal core is using, you can save yourself having to reinvent a bunch of stuff. And I guess my question is, do you think that there's any chance that, any of these tools will make it back into Drupal core as a replacement for something like Nightwatch so that we're all kind of on the same page instead of...
All I can say is, if there were a tool that's the likeliest tool, it would be Playwright at this point, for sure. But there's also Drupal test traits by is it Alex Potts that's released that? But anyway, there are a couple competing things out there. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that Playwright's going to own this market in 5 years.
I have one other question, which is you mentioned doing production or testing on production servers. Do you have any suggestions other than like the QA accounts module? Because you certainly don't want to be enabling that on a production server.
Yes, what we do, okay, so I highly recommend, if you guys are starting a new project, read the documentation on my website for Automated Testing Kit, okay? Because it is a kind of a step-by-step of what you're going to want to do. Because the choices that we made for Automated Testing Kit come from the real world, just like that. So we use the QA accounts module. So the QA accounts module is one that, as soon as you enable it, it creates a series of accounts for you. And that's the accounts that you're going to want your testers to use during their testing. Because they get to then modify it to have exactly the permissions they need because they're testing permissions. So we use maybe 6 or 7 different modules, and if you go to that, you'll see why we picked them. Some of them are obvious, like XML sitemap. If you want to test your sitemap generation and you're using XML sitemap, we have a test for that. One of them is Symphony Mailer. At one point, we were able to test emails leaving your site and then going actually out onto the public internet to ethereal.mail, but ethereal.mail just ended that free service, which sucks because it was great, and we don't have a solution for that yet, but we're going to have one. So all the important bits we want you to be able to test quickly, and we talk to you about how to set up the configuration so you can do it.
Just recently wrote a wrapper for Drush for Cypress.
Oh
Is
yeah.
there any chance that Automated Test Kit has something like that?
Absolutely, I can show you the helper function. Yeah, and we talk the wrapper for Drush speaks locally and speaks to target servers, and the target server can be Acquia or it can be Pantheon. Yeah. So for Pantheon we use Terminus. That's all figured out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you have, let's say I have a suite of BHAT tests,
Yep.
and one of the things that BHAT Listener lets you do is use the Drupal API to like create 3 test nodes, render test, and then it automatically cleans them up afterward. So if I wanted to convert some or all of the BHAT tests to, say, Playwright, like, can you write the same kind of test, or would you have like a generic set of starter content that you enable and disable? How would you handle that?
Yeah. So there are a few ways that's your test data. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's how you. There are a few ways the teams handle this sort of thing. Traditionally, what a team has done is they've gotten the database snapshot from production on Monday morning, and then the testers quickly added the dummy data that they wanted to test, and then they use that for the next 2 weeks until the release. Okay? So you can still do that manually. But your question was, how do you actually add the data? Well, there are all the traditional ways. You could use feeds, you could use CSV importer or something like that. But what I think is going to happen is it's going to end up being done by recipes. Because recipes just learned how to import default content. So the default content module was wonderful. I don't know if you know about that, but now that's moved into core. We now actually have a default content API. So what you can do is you can export your test nodes. They get converted into a YAML file, and then you specify them in your recipe. So if you want to quickly set up a database with all your test data, apply your recipe with your dummy data, and you're good to go. We're working on a recipe for Automated Testing Kit that will show you exactly how to do that. Because I want to be able to have people test Automated Testing Kit with some dummy data. We need a dummy 404 page. We need a dummy 403 page. We need all sorts of things, dummy media. So you're going to be able to just use that recipe, copy exactly that. Probably within about 2 weeks.
I have a follow-up to that.
Sure.
Which is if your test alters the data and you want to be able to not reinstall every time, like you want to run your test, you're debugging, like I said, you're doing VS Code, you're debugging your test, you start with a recipe that has default content, but your test alters it.
Yes.
Then how do you reset?
Well, you can reapply the recipe, but if your tests don't clean up after themselves, the recipe can't do cleanup. It can't do any deletion, and that's a design decision, and we'll probably never be able to do that. At that point, you just start with a fresh database. Yeah. I think, have we run out of time? Well, I promise. Actually, we have lunch after this. We don't have the next place for you to go to. If you would like to leave, go ahead. But if you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them. Anyone else? We're all good?
Thank you.
Okay, hit me up online.